Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys so much for joining me here on Thursday. Wanted to get in front of a camera today, talk about some of the latest news and rumors items that I think Steelers fans should know about here, guys. Going to talk a little bit about Tyreek Hill, talk a little bit about Romeo Doubs, the latest we're hearing about those guys and the Steelers' potential interest in those two receivers. And we'll get into some pretty surprising injury news from the Seattle Seahawks side as we get ready for this Week 2 matchup versus Seattle. And then we'll talk about potentially moving Darnell Washington to left tackle. That discussion has started to come up again after Broderick Jones struggled in Week 1 versus the New York Jets. And I'll give my take on that at the end of today's show, so make sure you guys stick around. But make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to get you guys another video later this evening as well, probably during halftime of Thursday Night Football between the Commanders and Packers, so keep your guys' eye out for that. But make sure you guys click that subscribe button because we're going to give you guys extensive Steelers coverage leading up to this Week 2 matchup versus the Seahawks. And, of course, we have our live watch party on Sunday itself. That all starts at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you guys want to join us for pre, during, and post-game coverage for the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend, you guys can join us at 11:30 and click that subscribe button to never miss a show. All right, so now let's talk about the latest wide receiver rumors surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tyreek Hill is a name that has been connected to the Steelers quite a bit over the last few days or so, specifically by NBC's Mike Florio, who has been pushing out there that he has a source that the Steelers, quote-unquote, want Tyreek Hill in a trade and are very much looking to potentially land him via trade before the NFL trade deadline this year. All right, and this is something that we've talked about on the show in the past, why this could potentially make sense. I think on the field, this idea does make some sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know that Arthur Smith and Mike Tomlin's vision for this passing game is you have a bunch of players out there that are speedsters, a bunch of players out there that can separate down the field and prevent or give this offense a vertical element to kind of counteract the ground and pound run game that they want to establish with this offense this year. So Tyreek Hill certainly fits that description, at least a player on the field, right? He is someone that's still blazing fast, maybe not quite as fast as he used to be. Maybe he's lost a little bit of a step, but he's still one of the fastest individuals in the National Football League, if not the fastest. Traditionally he's got better hands than people really give him credit for because he's really known for his speed, but he can make some tough catches as well. Really good route runner, really good after the catch as well. Pretty similar skill set, honestly, to a guy like Calvin Austin III, only obviously Tyreek is more established. He's had far more production and much more of an established presence than Calvin is. He's bigger than Calvin is, but he brings a lot of the same things that Calvin brings to the table, only he's more established. He's got more playoff experience, more Super Bowl experience, all that different stuff. And combining Hill with Austin and having those two guys as your speed threats in this offense could definitely strike fear in opposing defenses, especially when they still have to deal with DK Metcalf on the other side. So, at least on paper, from a financial standpoint, from a play standpoint on the field, I can certainly understand why the Steelers could potentially be interested in Tyreek Hill. Now, I will say I'm not the biggest believer in sourcing from Mike Florio, but he did say on Pittsburgh radio, I believe it was yesterday, that the same source that told him that the Steelers wanted Jalen Ramsey has now confirmed that the Steelers also want Tyreek Hill. So, especially if Calvin Austin III doesn't play particularly great as this team's number 2 receiver as we approach the trade deadline this year, really keep your eye on a Tyreek Hill potential trade here, at least to some team. If it's not even the Steelers, I think that Hill is probably going to be one of the more marquee trade kind of possibilities in the NFL as we approach the trade deadline this year. I think everything in Miami is kind of going down the toilet right now. He's kind of viewed as somebody that's been a locker room cancer there in Miami, and that's the thing that gives me pause about Tyreek Hill, ladies and gentlemen, is what he brings in terms of the locker room, in terms of the kind of character that he brings. It's been pretty well documented, some of the things that he has done off the field. And for an organization that has traded guys like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens for not being super high character guys, does it really make sense for the Steelers to bring in a guy in Tyreek Hill who has a little bit of a reputation around the league for that? I don't know. I would be open to the possibility. I don't know Tyreek personally. So I don't want to make like broad, assumptions about who he is as a person. I mean, I think this fan base maybe has learned their lesson on that when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, who I think, everybody in that Steelers locker room has been saying has been a fantastic leader and a great person, and very authentically himself and all these different things, very helpful to the young players in the locker room as well. So maybe Tyreek is a better person than maybe some of the things that are out there would indicate, but it definitely gives me pause, especially with the new allegations that just came out on him. Now, apparently the league has already done an investigation into that, and they are not suspending him at this point in time. So we'll see what ends up happening with Tyreek, guys. I think on the field it does make some sense. Financially, you only add like $15 million in cap space this year if you would have traded for him before the season. Now that roster bonus for Miami has gone through because that kicked in at the end of August. So like getting him at this point in a trade would be super affordable for the Steelers, and you get somebody with Super Bowl experience, somebody that's a Super Bowl champion, somebody that brings a lot of speed and dynamic playmaking ability to this offense. So it would not surprise me if the Steelers end up trading for him. Obviously, they've done business with Miami in the past, and if Miami feels like their season's over within the next couple of weeks, I would not be surprised at all if they end up shopping him. So definitely keep your eye on the Tyreek Hill situation, because I think on the field he would bring something to this Steelers team, and I can understand why the team would be interested in adding him, because they are definitely doing an all-in type of posture, and I do think they'd be willing to give up maybe as high as a third-round pick to go get him. I know that they've been very precious with their 2026 draft capital to this point in the process, but if it means, if the Steelers feel like they can take it to an even higher level than where they are now and really go for a Super Bowl in Aaron Rodgers' lone season, or apparently his lone season here in Pittsburgh, I think there's a chance he comes back next year. But if you can land Tyreek Hill and pair him up with DK Metcalf, and Calvin Austin immediately becomes one of the best third receivers in the league, I can certainly see why the Steelers would be interested in this. Then there was also a report yesterday that at least two teams have standing offers for Green Bay Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs in a trade. Of course, the Packers just extended Christian Watson, another receiver on their roster, to a one-year extension. And they have, of course, Matthew Golden. Of course, they have Jaden Reed. Of course, they drafted Savion Williams as well in the draft this year. It just seems like Doubs, especially once Christian Watson gets back, is going to be moving down the totem pole. And I do think Doubs is another option that the Steelers probably have a standing offer for right now. I think that they would like to add his size, his route running, his chemistry with Aaron Rodgers to this Steelers offense. He does have a little bit of a drop issue. He's got a little bit of a concussion concern. He had two of them last year. But for the right price, and I think the Steelers have their price, and kind of knowing Omar Khan's negotiation style, he's got his price and he's not going to be budging off of it. So whether that's a 6th-round pick, 7th-round pick, 5th-round pick, whatever they offered Green Bay, I'm sure they do have that standing offer out there. I think Aaron Rodgers would love to play with Romeo again. He was very, very complimentary of him when he was still playing in Green Bay, and there was a report that he actually called the Packers personally to see what his status was. So it certainly seems like the Steelers are interested in Doubs as well, and I think the Steelers will be looking potentially to add another receiving threat to this room before we get to the trade deadline this year. Obviously, the deal has to be right. I think they're fine with the receivers they have in their room right now. And hey, four passing touchdowns for this offense last week against what many people consider to be a pretty talented defense there in New York. So the way I'm kind of approaching it, guys, is that if they can get another receiver, great. But I think Calvin Austin showed last week that he's more than capable of being the number 2 receiving threat in this offense. So if you add a great player like Tyreek Hill, if you add a very promising player like Romeo Doubs, I'm all for it, especially for the right price. I don't want to overpay for them, but for the right price, I'm all for adding more talent and more depth into the wide receiver room here, guys, especially because, in my opinion, DK Metcalf gets injured, you are in a lot of trouble with this wide receiver room. So getting another guy in there that can be a legitimate starting receiver in this offense if DK Metcalf goes down, I think would be a very good thing for this football team. But certainly we'll see what ends up happening in the weeks to come. Now I'll shift here to the Seattle Seahawks injury report. First one that came out on Wednesday. There's some surprises. Devon Witherspoon, their number 1 corner and slot corner, did not practice on Wednesday with a knee injury. Be very interesting to track his status as the week goes on. Very important to that Seattle Seahawks defense. Nick Emmanwori, who got injured last week, he injured his ankle in the game against the 49ers. He did not practice either. And then Ernest Jones was another addition to the did not practice list for Seattle this week. Jones is their number one inside linebacker. He's one of their best players, in my opinion, in the middle of their defense, and he's one of the more underrated players at the inside linebacker position in the league. He's dealing with a shoulder issue. So if you're missing all three of those players, guys, Devin Witherspoon, Nick Emmanwori, and Ernest Jones, that defense is going to be in a lot of trouble, in my opinion. So we'll definitely keep you guys updated on those guys' statuses as the week goes on. As for Steelers questionables right now, it certainly seems like Nick Herbig is on his way to playing in this week, and then Joey Porter Jr. did not practice on Wednesday. Mike Tomlin said he was optimistic about Joey's chances of playing on Sunday, but he did not practice on Wednesday. Once again, we'll keep you guys updated on all the injury updates surrounding this Week 2 matchup. We'll finish up today's show here with a little bit of discussion surrounding Darnell Washington. There's some people, some Steelers fans out there, once again pushing the idea that he should be moved to left tackle over Broderick Jones because Broderick is not good enough. And I think that should be a possibility for the Steelers, but I will also say I think that should be the last resort because Darnell is legitimately a weapon to be used as a tight end. He gives the Steelers a big competitive advantage because he's pretty much a sixth offensive lineman out there as a run blocker. So if you can find any way to make it work with Broderick Jones, if you can find any way to make it work with even Calvin Anderson or Andrus Peat, your backup tackle options, if you can trade for a different left tackle option before the trade deadline, if you want to bring in, if you feel like David Bakhtiari can come in here and be better at left tackle, I want to explore all those options before you think about putting Darnell Washington at left tackle. Number one, because of the value Washington brings as a tight end to this Steelers offense and the competitive advantage he brings as somebody that's as big as he is, somebody that is athletic as he is, somebody that can catch the football the way that he can. I think he's an excellent blocker, and I think if push comes to shove and the Steelers just need somebody stable at left tackle, he might be more stable than Broderick Jones, which is crazy to say, but it could be the case. But I just really want Darnell to stay at tight end. Plus, there's also the reality that Darnell has not practiced at offensive tackle, so if he's asked to play there full time and he's going up against legitimate number one edge rushers week in and week out as the starting left tackle of this team, he's just not very good, right? So I think blocking as a tight end it gives him a lot of advantages that he would not have the benefit of having if he was playing left tackle. So I think we have to be careful with this idea of putting Darnell Washington at left tackle. I just don't really see it as a possibility, guys. I think they would much rather go down multiple other avenues if they are going to be replacing Broderick Jones. But obviously plan A is still for Broderick to bounce back, have a good season. And I think the clock is ticking on him. I think that, if he's not better by the trade deadline, the Steelers will have to make some sort of move because you can't go into the playoffs with Broderick playing the way he did in Week 1. But I think probably the last resort that the Steelers would turn to is putting Darnell Washington there. So that's kind of my take on that situation, guys. Speaking of Broderick Jones and the left tackle situation, our second video today is probably, unless there's other news that comes out throughout the day, I'm planning on doing a video breaking down the top left tackle replacement options for the Pittsburgh Steelers, guys that could be traded before the trade deadline, free agent options, all those different options that the Steelers have at their disposal. So if you guys want those options, you guys can check out our video later today. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button so you know when that video comes out. I greatly appreciate your guys' support. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.